Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm really excited for today's video because we are going to be talking all about the palettes I would choose if I could only choose one palette from some brands throughout my collection. I have seen this video circulating for a couple weeks now, and I did a video similar to this last year inspired by a video that Samantha March did, so I'll leave that linked down below. So today we are talking about the palette I would choose if I could only choose one from brands within my collection that I own multiple palettes from. So I went through my collection and I have 11 brands that I own at least 2 or more palettes from, and I selected the palette that I would choose from that brand if I could only choose one. So if you guys are interested in seeing the palettes that I would choose if I could only choose one palette from a brand, then stay tuned. First, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, I hope you'll consider doing so before you go. I do post a minimum of 4 times a week, so if that's something that interests you, then subscribe before moving on. But other than that, let's just jump into the video. So like I said in the introduction, I do have 11 brands in my collection that I own multiple palettes from that brand. Some of these decisions were easier to make than others. So I'm going to start with the 4 palettes that I knew immediately, like wasn't even a tough decision for me at all. So we're actually going to start with ABH because I talk about this palette so often and you guys can probably already guess, but I do own, I believe it's 10 palettes from Anastasia Beverly Hills. I actually have the Imrezy palette on my eyes today. I went for like a pinky purple look. But the palette that I would choose if I could only choose one from ABH, say it with me, it would be the ABH Jackie palette. Runner up for this may have been, it would either have been my Mario palette, just because that one is so near and dear to my heart, or the Sultry palette. I have been playing around with the Sultry palette lately and the shimmers are just so beautiful in that palette, but I am going with the ABH Jackie palette because this offers some really beautiful warm matte browns, which I love to have in my collection, but you also get some fun colors and some really amazing shimmers as well in this. I feel like I'm not even going to drone on about this because I've talked about this so much on my channel the last couple of months, but you guys know that I love this palette and it wasn't even a question. This would definitely be the palette I would choose if I could only keep one of my ABH palettes. Next up was Juvia's Place, and I currently own 4 palettes from Juvia's Place. I've decluttered a few throughout the past, and this was no question. Again, this might be shocking, but the palette I would choose if I could only choose one to keep from Juvia's Place would be the Nubian Mini. And the reason being is this is just such an easy palette to work with. I know exactly what I'm going to do when I reach into this, and I just really don't have to think when I look into this palette. The other like runner-up would have been the Magic palette, just because I love the colorful shimmers throughout that palette. But sometimes I get a little stuck with that palette because I'm not the best blender and I'm not like the most creative. I'm trying to get more and more creative, but this is just a really safe choice. This is easy for travel. I love mini palettes. I personally just love minis, and it really wasn't much of a question when it came to deciding which palette I would keep from Juvia's. The quality throughout all of the palettes that I've tried from Juvia's Place are all really, really good, so it really had nothing to do with quality. This is just a nice, easy palette to use, and it would definitely be my choice. Next up from Persona Cosmetics, it wasn't a hard choice, and it's crazy because I own 2 palettes from Persona, the Identity 1 and the Identity 2, and I love the Identity 2 palette. I really do, but I had to choose the Identity 1 because, again, this palette just takes a little bit less thought when I'm reaching into, and the shimmers in this palette are just so freaking amazing. I just couldn't be without these in my collection. I love the play on cool tones throughout this palette. Bombshell is one of my favorite shades, one of my favorite shimmers, like cool tone shimmers throughout my entire collection. All of the shimmers in here offer just such a high impact. You really cannot beat it. The only other formula I can think of that's similar to this when it comes to shimmers like this, just like a good foiled shimmer, is the Dominique Cosmetics Latte palette. I absolutely love that as well. You can use a dry brush with these and it's going to just, bam, give you an amazing foiled look, and I love this palette. Again, it really wasn't even a question. I knew I was going to pick this one, probably because it's less colorful, less thought when using this, but I really, really love this one from Persona. And then the 4th palette, I knew immediately what my choice was going to be. Was my choice from the Pat McGrath. I do own 3 Pat McGrath palettes, and my choice was my large one from Pat. This is the Bronze Seduction palette. What a beautiful palette. I also own a really mini from Pat McGrath that was just kind of like meh, and then I also own one of these 6-pan palettes, but I just love the color story in this. Do I think that the Pat McGrath palettes are worth $125? I mean, you're paying for it in the packaging. It's really beautiful, heavy, luxurious packaging, and the formula is really unique throughout with these shimmers. This one has 3 mattes and then 7 shimmers. It's a really unique formula. I don't know that I would ever pay $125 again. I don't want to say never because I surprise myself all the time. But I love the green and the red and this like white reflect into green. Like I really do love this palette. Plus I paid $125 for it. So if I could only keep one, I would probably definitely want to keep my most expensive, you know? Sorry you guys, there was a 5th palette that was another easy decision. I just missed the little asterisk by it. So this one is from Dose of Colors. I do own 5 palettes from Dose of Colors. I own 4 of the 5-pan eyeshadows, and then I own Friendcation, and I would absolutely keep this one if I could only keep one, not only because it offers twice the amount of eyeshadow. Like I said, I do like mini eyeshadow palettes, but this offers all of the matte browns that I need for just a quick, easy look, and then it offers the coolest shimmers throughout my collection. Now, I said that the Persona Cosmetics Identity palette offers a really high impact shimmer, but this offers such a unique shimmer, and these again are pretty high impact as well. These you can layer to create different shades. You can layer like the blues and the reds to create more of like a purple tone shade, so you can just do some really interesting things with this palette, and I just love this one. This is a staple in my collection. I definitely wouldn't want to be without this one, so if I had to get rid of all of my Dose of Colors palettes except for one, I would definitely keep this guy. Okay, moving on to the second wave, I have 3 eyeshadow palettes that were like a little bit harder to make the decision, but still I came to a decision pretty quickly. Starting with Tarte, I have 3 eyeshadow palettes from Tarte. My decision came down to the Tartelette in Bloom and the Love Trust in Fairy Dust palette. The Love Trust in Fairy Dust palette is a little bit more mauve toned, and eventually I landed on this just because Tartelette in Bloom is such a staple in my collection, and it's so user friendly. You also get a really nice mirror in this. I've said this many times, I really need to replace this, especially like this leader shade. I saw someone else talk about this palette recently, and I was like, my palette really doesn't look like that anymore. This is very old within my collection. It still smells really nice for being like as old as it is. It's one of the older palettes in my collection, but I just love all of the looks that I create with this. It's very easy to create looks. If I don't know what I want to do for the day, I just reach into this. This is another one I travel with a lot, and I just think this is such a great one from Tarte. I know Tarte's eyeshadow formula is hit and miss sometimes, but this, impeccable. Next up was Huda Beauty, and Huda Beauty is the formula that I own the most from. I own 10 Huda Beauty palettes throughout my collection. I love Huda Beauty's eyeshadow. And it came down to the Huda Mercury Retrograde, which you guys know I love that palette. And then it also came to my favorite mini palette that I own from Huda, which is the Smoky Obsessions. And I eventually landed on Smoky Obsessions. I feel like nothing that I'm keeping really offers much for color. I have to be careful with this one because I do have a shade that shadowed on me and I had to repress up here. So this is what Smoky Obsessions looks like. It's just such an easy palette to work with. I love every look that I've created with this. I take this traveling with me all the time. I love that it's sleek, compact, mini. And I love the browns and just the cool tones in this. I love the Huda Mercury Retrograde palette too. It offers some really unique textures, colors, etc. So it was a pretty hard decision. And even now I'm like, it would suck to be without my Huda Mercury palette as well. But I just love this palette so much. This has been near and dear to my heart for so long. I couldn't be without the Huda Smoky Obsessions palette. Okay, next up is Melt Cosmetics. And I actually own 3 palettes from Melt. And the reason this decision was a little bit more difficult to make is because the palette that I'm choosing has been in my collection a very short amount of time, but it is the Melt Rust palette, and it is so beautiful. I truly cannot wait to use this palette in the fall time just because it screams fall vibes. The reason I went with this palette is because the formula is very true to Melt's other formulas in their other palettes. Sometimes I find that the darker mattes are a little bit harder to work with Melt, but I didn't have any trouble using the shade Mar, which is the darkest I've used in this palette. I have not yet reached for Rot. But this is just a beautiful, beautiful palette. I love the color story. Again, browns, cool or warm tone, doesn't really matter. I just love my neutral browns. I cannot wait to play around with this palette more. I thought about choosing the Gemini palette because it does offer those unique greens, and I really do love green eyeshadow, but I just couldn't deny this color story. It's so beautiful. So this is the palette I would choose if I could only choose one out of my Melt palettes. All right, and then moving on to the final three. These were the hardest decisions for me to make. So starting with ColourPop, the reason I had such a difficult time deciding was just because the palette I ended up picking was one that's limited edition and you can no longer get it, and so I felt like that wasn't really fair. But really, if I could only choose one ColourPop palette to keep from my collection, which I only own 3 ColourPop palettes right now, it would be the Dream Street palette in collaboration with Kathleen Lights. I just think that there's nothing wrong about this palette. I love everything about this palette. It has the warm browns, but it has these beautiful pops. The shimmers in here are so beautiful, from my favorite shade, which is in Mermaid Boy or Kaleidoscope. I can never remember. I think Kaleidoscope. From Kaleidoscope to the beautiful like rose gold shimmers up here. I just think it is such a stunning palette, and I would definitely keep this guy. From Nabla, I was trying to decide between the Secret palette, the Secret palette, I think? The Secret, yeah, because it's the Poison I don't like. So the Secret and the Dreamy 2. And the Secret palette I just love so much because it has that shifty green shade. But really, if I really thought hard about it, I would definitely have to keep the Nabla Dreamy 2. Every time I reach into this palette, I am just so creatively inspired, and even though it might not look like the most inspiring palette to some, I just have so much fun every time I reach into this palette, and I come up with something new every time. Every time I start with a look in mind and I come up with something totally different, but I'm always really excited about the looks that I create with this. It has some really, really fun like blue and purple shades, as well as some that kind of have this green shift to it, which you guys know I can appreciate and love. And then it also has some really beautiful matte browns, which I love. So I would definitely keep the Nabla Dreamy 2. It was a tough decision, but it's the decision I finally landed on. And then the final decision I had to make was my Natasha Denona decision. And I own 8 palettes from Natasha Denona currently, 3 larger palettes, and then 5 minis. You guys, I'm still not even like 100% sold on this decision, which tells me I really do love my Natasha Denona palettes in general. The minis I appreciate for their like ease of use. The formula throughout most of them has been pretty good for me, but the thing that I love about my larger palettes is just the like creativity, the color story. Just I love Natasha Denona eyeshadow, and I hate myself for it, but I do. So the decision that I made, and again, still I'm like, oh, I don't know if this is the right one, but I decided on the Natasha Denona Gold palette. You guys probably think I'm the most boring person ever, but again, I just love that it offers such a range of browns, and then it has one of my favorite green shades throughout my collection, which is in the shade Lime Chrome. Right up here, it's such a cool shade. I just love this shade, and every time I use it I get compliments on it. And then it also has this like chunkier green gold shade right down here, which I will swatch. I love this shade as well. It's such a cool shade. Like, look at that. That is absolutely stunning. And then there's the other one that I love to use as well. I just truly would hate to be without those greens. I am really impressed with the new Natasha Denona Retro palette. I think that's a really pretty color story. I also love the Mini Star because it has one of my favorite neutral browns. I love the Mini Nude because it's so easy to use. I also love my Coral like Sunrise palette, I think it is. The Sunrise palette, and the Lila palette is a favorite as well. I love the purple story in that, but I couldn't be without my greens, so I had to go with the Natasha Denona Gold palette. And after that, that is going to conclude my if I could only choose one eyeshadow palette from some brands throughout my collection. I would love to hear from you guys in the comments below about some of your favorite palettes from some of your favorite eyeshadow brands. Leave me a comment down below and let me know. Other than that, thank you so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting my channel, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye.